The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls of Alexander Pierce's penthouse, a sea of twinkling lights flickering beneath the deep velvet sky. From the top of his towering mansion, he could see everything. Endless streets pulsing with life, golden-lit skyscrapers standing like sentinels of ambition. Yet, despite his empire of wealth, Alexander felt like a ghost drifting through it all, untethered and alone. He sat in his dimly lit study, a glass of aged scotch untouched beside him. The leather chair beneath him was cold, its edges sharp, unyielding, just like the life he had built. A man known for his ruthless business acumen, Alexander had conquered industries, crushed competitors, and amassed a fortune that most could only dream of. But in the stillness of the night, when the deals were done, when the calls stopped, and the city quieted, there was no one left to share it with. The mansion was silent, always silent. He closed his eyes, leaning back, listening to the faint hum of the wind outside. He tried to remember the last time someone had called his name. Not an assistant, not a business partner, not an investor, but someone who truly saw him. The answer came like a whisper from the past, his mother's voice. Money can build walls, Alex, but it can't build a home. She had said that to him once, when he was young, before she passed. Back then, he hadn't understood. He had believed that success would bring happiness, that power would shield him from loneliness. And yet, here he was, a king in a castle of glass and steel, staring out at a world he felt no part of. With a sigh, he stood and wandered down the long, marble hallway of his mansion. The sound of his own footsteps echoed back at him. He passed room after room, each one immaculate, untouched, lifeless. A library filled with books he never read. A dining hall with a table set for 10, though he always ate alone. A nursery, his steps halted. The nursery had been a whim. A fleeting thought turned into reality when an interior designer suggested it. For the future, she had said, just in case. He had nodded, not really thinking about it, and then never set foot inside again. Slowly, he turned the handle and pushed the door open. A soft glow filled the space, muted moonlight spilling through sheer curtains. The room smelled of cedar wood and fresh linen. The crib stood empty in the center, its delicate frame untouched. A rocking chair sat beside it, waiting for someone who would never come. Alexander took a slow breath, an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He imagined laughter in this room, tiny footsteps running down his hallways, a small hand in his. The thought sent an ache through him so deep, so profound, that it caught him off guard. For years, he had built, conquered, expanded. He had thought of everything, except the one thing that might have made it all worth something. A family. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a sharp reminder of the world outside. He pulled it out, expecting another business deal, another meeting, another acquisition. But instead, his eyes caught on an old email, one he had bookmarked but never opened. Adoption inquiry form. He had researched it once, briefly, a passing thought on a restless night. He had convinced himself he was too busy, too unfit, too much of something and not enough of something else. But tonight, as he stood in this quiet room, he knew the truth. No amount of money, no empire, no trophy of success would ever erase the loneliness he felt in this house. Before he could stop himself, before logic could pull him back, he sat down in a rocking chair, opened the email, and began to type. I'm interested in adoption. Please tell me what I need to do. He hit send. The screen dimmed, and silence wrapped around him again. But this time it felt different. The room was still empty. The house was still vast and silent. But for the first time in years, Alexander felt something else beneath the quiet. Hope. And with that, he leaned back in the rocking chair, closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long, long time, he let himself dream of something more. The adoption center was smaller than Alexander had imagined. It was tucked away in a quiet part of the city, far from the towering skyscrapers and endless rush of business deals that consumed his life. The building itself was modest, pale brick walls, a small wooden sign swinging slightly in the wind. Alexander stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking softly against the linoleum floor. The scent of old books, vanilla, and something faintly like crayons filled the air. A kind-faced woman greeted him at the front desk. "Mr. Pierce?" she asked, her voice warm. "We weren't expecting you today." He hesitated, surprised at his own impulse. He had barely slept since sending the email, expecting himself to change his mind by morning. But instead, something had pushed him here. "I wanted to start the process," he said finally. "To see the children." The woman nodded. "Of course. We have files for you to review, and you're welcome to meet some of them in the common room." She led him down a quiet hallway lined with drawings taped to the walls, stick figures with wide smiles, colorful scribbles of houses, a bright yellow sun. They were the kind of pictures that belonged on a refrigerator, not pinned to an institutional wall. The woman ushered him into a small office and placed a stack of files before him. "These are some of the children available for adoption," she said kindly. "Take your time." Alexander opened the first file, scanning the details with the precision of a businessman. Name, age, medical history, background. He moved to the next, then the next, absorbing the information efficiently, his mind treating it like another decision to be made. Then he saw him. The file was thinner than the others. Just a few pages. No detailed history. No listed relatives. Name, Ethan Carter. Age, 6 years old. His breath caught. Carter. The name struck him like lightning, sending a strange, twisting feeling through his chest. He turned the page, and then his world stopped. A small photograph was clipped to the file. A boy, sitting cross-legged on the floor, hands resting in his lap. He had dark brown hair, a slightly furrowed brow, and eyes that... No, that's not possible. Alexander felt his heartbeat pound against his ribs. The air in the room grew thick, because those weren't just any eyes. They were her eyes. The same deep brown, the same quiet sadness. The exact eyes of Lena Carter, his first love. The girl he had lost after high school. The girl who had disappeared from his life, leaving nothing but memories and unanswered questions. His hands trembled slightly as he closed the file. "I'd like to meet this one." The woman nodded, leading him down another hallway to a large common room. Children played quietly, some drawing, some stacking blocks, a few curled up with books. But Alexander's eyes searched the room frantically, his pulse roaring in his ears. And then he saw him. A small boy, no older than 6, sat alone by the window, knees tucked to his chest, watching the rain streak down the glass. Alexander froze. It wasn't just the eyes. It was the tilt of his head, the way his small fingers tapped idly against the window pane, the delicate way he sighed, as if his little heart carried a weight too heavy for him to bear. Alexander took a step forward, but the floor seemed to shift beneath him. Then, as if sensing something, the boy turned. Their eyes met. Alexander stopped breathing. It was like looking into a mirror of the past. The sharp angles of his own face reflected in softer, younger features. The same shape of his jaw, the same arch of his brow. His blood turned to ice. This wasn't just a resemblance. This child, he looked like me too. He staggered back, gripping the edge of a nearby chair for support. His mind screamed for logic, for reason, but all he could do was stare at the impossible truth sitting before him. Ethan blinked at him, studying him with quiet curiosity. And then, in a voice so small and soft it sent a shiver down Alexander's spine, the boy said, "Are you here to take me home?" Alexander's vision blurred for the first time in years, because he already knew the answer. Alexander's world had been built on certainty, on numbers, strategies, and calculated risks. But now, standing in the quiet office of the orphanage director, his hands curled into fists at his sides, he felt like the ground beneath him had collapsed. Ethan Carter. The name echoed in his mind like a ghost from another life. His heart pounded as he stared at the worn folder in front of him, his pulse thrumming in his ears. This boy, Alexander's voice was hoarse, his throat tight. Where did he come from? The orphanage director, a woman in her 60s with kind, knowing eyes, hesitated. She glanced at him carefully before sliding the file across the desk. Ethan was left at our doors as a baby. No birth certificate, no known relatives. Alexander swallowed hard, his fingers stiff as he opened the folder. Inside, there were only a few pages. A medical report, a list of vaccinations, notes from caregivers, and then at the very bottom of the stack, a single yellowed slip of paper. His breath hitched as he lifted it with shaking hands. The handwriting was faded but unmistakable. His father's name is Alexander. He will find him one day. A sharp gasp tore from his chest, as if all the air had been knocked from his lungs. His knees nearly buckled. His eyes darted over the words again, reading them, rereading them, trying to force his brain to reject what his heart already knew. No, this isn't possible. But it was. 1,000 memories surged forward, colliding with the present. The last time he had seen Lena Carter had been on a rainy summer night, just days before they were supposed to leave for different colleges. She had clung to him in the dim glow of streetlights, her fingers digging into the fabric of his jacket. "Stay, Alex. Please." Her voice had been soft but desperate. "You know I can't." He had said the words too quickly, too decisively, because back then, ambition had meant everything. She had swallowed hard, forcing a sad smile. "Then promise me something. Anything. Don't forget me." He hadn't. Not once. But he had moved forward, built his empire, convinced himself that what they had was just young love. Beautiful, fleeting, meant to be left in the past. And now, standing in this tiny office, staring at a boy who carried his eyes and her name, he realized that the past had never truly let him go. He looked up at the director, his voice raw. Who left him here?" The director sighed. "He was found on our doorstep one night, wrapped in a thin blanket. No information except that note. She hesitated before adding, "We searched, of course. Tried to find his mother, but there were no traces, no records of a Lena Carter matching the description we had." A cold, sick feeling twisted in Alexander's stomach. She was gone. That's what the director was saying, without saying it. Somewhere along the way, Lena had disappeared, and she had left behind the only piece of herself she had left in the world. Their son, his chest tightened painfully. 6 years. 6 years that he could never get back. 6 years where his child had been alone in the world, waiting for him. Alexander's hands curled into fists, rage and heartbreak battling inside him. He had spent years chasing power, building a kingdom of wealth, all the while his own blood had been sitting in an orphanage, staring out rain-streaked windows, waiting for a father who never came. His legs felt weak as he sank into the chair in front of the director's desk. He dragged a hand down his face, his breath uneven. He thought of Ethan's small frame, his quiet nature, the way he had asked, "Are you here to take me home?" A lump formed in his throat. The universe had brought him here. A decision made in a moment of loneliness had led him to his son. He looked back down at the note in his hands. He will find him one day. His fingers curled around the paper, as if gripping it tightly would somehow rewind time. But he knew better. He couldn't change the past. But maybe, just maybe, he could make sure that Ethan never spent another day alone. Alexander stood abruptly. The director blinked up at him. "Mr. Pierce, I want to begin the adoption process." His voice was steadier now, determined. Immediately, the director's lips parted in surprise, but she quickly nodded. "There will be procedures, of course. Home visits, legal documents. I don't care what it takes," Alexander cut in. His eyes burned, his heart hammering. "He's my son. I won't let him stay here another day longer than necessary." The words left his mouth before he could stop them, and once they were spoken, they felt undeniable. This was not a choice. This was his responsibility, his fate, his second chance. He turned for the door, but before stepping out, he paused. One last question clawed at his throat. "Lena," his voice was barely above a whisper. "Did she ever leave anything else? Any message for me?" The director hesitated, then shook her head. "No, just the note." His heart twisted painfully. For the first time in his life, Alexander Pierce had everything, but he had never felt such a profound loss. But when he stepped back into the hallway, the feeling shifted, because there, sitting quietly by the window, was Ethan, his son. And for the first time, Alexander wasn't thinking about what he had lost. He was thinking about what he had just found. Alexander barely slept that night. He sat in his study, staring out at the city skyline. But for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business or deals. All he could see was a pair of familiar brown eyes staring back at him. Ethan's eyes. Lena's eyes. His hands trembled as he traced the edges of the note left with Ethan all those years ago. His father's name is Alexander. He will find him one day. She had believed in him. Even after all those years, after he had walked away, she had trusted that he would come. And he had. Not by choice, not by plan, but by something bigger. Something that felt like fate. But now, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Alexander knew one thing for certain. This was no longer about fate. This was about choice. And he had already made his. The orphanage was quieter in the early morning light. The air smelled of fresh bread from the kitchen, the soft hum of waking children filling the halls. Alexander walked through the corridors, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had stood in boardrooms that controlled the economy. He had made billion-dollar deals with a single signature. He had looked men in the eyes who would have destroyed him at the first sign of weakness. But nothing had ever made him more terrified than walking back into that orphanage, knowing what he was about to do. He wasn't just here to adopt a child. He was here to take back the part of his soul he had lost. He found Ethan in the same place as yesterday, by the window, watching the world outside. The boy sat quietly, his knees tucked to his chest, fingers resting against the cool glass. But today, he wasn't just another orphan in a crowded room. Today, he was Alexander's son. Taking a deep breath, Alexander stepped forward. "Ethan," the boy turned, blinking up at him with those impossibly familiar eyes. Alexander's throat tightened. How had he not seen it immediately? His own features softened by youth, Lena's quiet depth in his gaze. Everything about him was proof of a life Alexander never knew existed. With shaking hands, he knelt down in front of him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, barely above a whisper, Alexander asked the question that had haunted him since yesterday. "Do you know who I am?" Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying him with the same quiet thoughtfulness he had the day before. Alexander's pulse roared in his ears. Then, in a voice so soft it sent a shiver down his spine, the boy whispered, "Mommy said you'd come." Alexander's world shattered. His breath caught, a raw, broken sound escaping his lips. His vision blurred, his chest ached, his hands trembled. She knew. She always knew. Lena had never told him, never reached out. But somehow she had believed that one day he would find his way back. Tears burned his eyes as he reached forward, his fingers brushing against Ethan's small hands. "I should have come sooner," he choked out, his voice barely steady. "I didn't know." He stopped himself, because none of that mattered now. All that mattered was the boy in front of him. Slowly, cautiously, he pulled Ethan into his arms. And for the first time, Ethan didn't hesitate. The boy leaned into him, small fingers curling into Alexander's coat, his body pressing close as if he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. And maybe he had. Alexander held him tighter. He had spent his entire life building an empire to fill the emptiness inside him. But this tiny, fragile weight in his arms, this was what had been missing. He buried his face in Ethan's soft brown hair, inhaling the faint scent of soap and sunshine, and whispered, "I'm here now." Ethan didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because for the first time in years, Alexander's mansion wouldn't be empty. For the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. This wasn't just fate. It was a second chance at the one thing money could never buy, family. And this time, he wouldn't let it go.